Hi, and welcome to this Forte Digital Tech for Lunch meetup. I'm Thomas Holtetveit, and I work as a Chief Architect at Forte Digital. And we are a multidisciplinary consultancy based out of Norway and Poland, with three main departments: strategy, experience, and technology. I'm working on the technology department. So, what do? We help ambitious companies with scaling and growth through digital success. And it's been our experience that to help our customers, we need to help them understand the problem that they want to fix. We need to be both part of finding the problem and then solving it. And to do that, we need multidisciplinary teams, but we also need a buy-in from the customer, hence the ambitiousness in the companies that we're looking for. We can't just come in and do our thing without the rest of the company being involved. And we are about 130-ish in Oslo and 80 in Krakow in Poland, and that's quite a leap from the 5 founders that we were in 2017. We have had a huge expansion, but we still need good people. So if this sounds interesting to you, reach out to me or Monica. And we want to be a place where people want to stay and grow. So the topic today is source control of Microsoft SQL Azure Databases, and how to deploy them into production, or deploy them to Azure through GitHub as our continuous integration, continuous deployment pipeline. And huge thanks to our sponsors, Microsoft and RedGate. A bit more on that afterwards, but we will be also giving away a free Flyway license from RedGate. So again, huge thanks. Source control is a foundation of development and a hard requirement of Agile DevOps. If you don't have control over the data that you're working with, and you don't have control of the changes that you do, you really cannot have a controlled development experience. So why have databases been left out? What to version, how to version, when to migrate. How to version, when to migrate. And these are all questions that we will cover now. On why it's been left out. Well, there hasn't really been that good tool base for databases, at least compared to the tooling that we have for deploying code. And we will also cover some of these other difficulties or areas that needs to be addressed. So first, on the state changes. Typically, this is what you need to go through if you want to do a change locally and then promote it to some other environment. So you have your initial state, and then you do some change to it, and that change itself could be persisted as a migration script or not. And then you check in either the state or the migration into source control, and then you pick it up from source control, either that individual change or as a change set. And then you have the current state of the database that you want to apply to. And then you either need to build a new migration script, or you combine already existing migrations and apply it to to the target database, leaving you with the desired end state, and typically also verified at the end. So what to version? Version the structure, data, or both? Well, the structure is quite straightforward to what can be done. SQL databases are quite easy to script, and the data could be a bit more tricky. Do you want any data at all? Do you want some lookup or dimensional data? Do you want synthetic test data? Do you want a full out production-like database? And in that case, what about GDPR or other privacy concerns or business rules? And of course, right. I'm not sure if I can zoom in anymore. I got a question if there was a problem with the quality of the slides. Fortunately, very few of the slides have that small text, so I can read what's on the slide again. On the data, there's what data to version, only lookup data / dimensional data, or synthetic test data. I don't think I can zoom this in on in the presentation right now. Okay, I'm sorry, we just have to continue on. Okay, so how to handle that? Well, of course, the answer there is would depend very much on the case that you're trying to solve. If you only have very poor or very limited test data, then you probably will need to spend a lot of time with keeping this data in sync manually, or that you will be hampered on the presentation. Sorry. Okay. If we have problems here, I can. It looks like my plan was failing here. So, okay, 1 second here. So now I can't see any chat. So I hope that this is improving the presentation. Okay, so moving on. How to version it? So we can version it as desired state configuration, migration scripts, or hybrid approach. So the desired state configuration would be to store how the structure of what we want it to look like. Migration scripts will be how to get from one place to another, and a hybrid will combine them. So let's take a look a bit further on these approaches. And the desired state configuration, as I said, it stores a representation of how it should look like. So typically this would be the create table statement. Pros of this approach is less risk of missing migrations, and it can often handle at least some type of drift better. Drift, that being changes in an environment compared to what is actually checked in. A con, there may not be a natural given path from a target state to another. This could be a problem that you need to address manually if you don't use a hybrid approach. So examples of this would be RedGate SQL source control and DacPac, or a database project. So migration scripts. It stores change scripts in a specific order and information on the current applied version. To get to the new state, we only need to apply any new migration in the given order. And you can migrate to any state, but you have to make sure that you actually store each of the migrations and store them full, so that you don't skip over one small step. And examples on this would be Flyway or EntityFramework migration. And a hybrid approach would be to store migration scripts in addition to the desired state, so that you can migrate in the few cases where you're simply unable to do so in the desired state way. But it also has a higher risk of problems and could be hard to roll back. So when to migrate? Well, you can do this manually. So you have this checked in, and you have the control, but it could be quite a lot of work to actually apply the different changes. And this is typically what I've had to do, at least on larger systems before. You could also have automatic apply in the application. For example, having this using the built-in migration support in EntityFramework. But this has potential problems on, this is another step you need to do before the application is ready. And you don't want this to be done on multiple nodes at the same time. So this has some significant problems you probably don't want on a larger system in production. And then you have automatic apply in the continuous delivery pipeline. And this is the option that we will take a look at today. So let's change to our demo on Flyway. So we will take a look at first what is Flyway and Flyway Hub. So let's see if I can can't see the tabs that I'm working on now since my so on so Flyway is a tool built by RedGate. It's an open source project, and it also has a paid version or supported version with additional functions. So here you check in a set of SQL files. At least that's the part that we will be covering now. It can also do Java-based migrations, but this is not something that we will cover in this demo. So it supports 3 types of migrations: a versioned, an undo, and a repeatable migration. So the repeatable is something that's supposed to be idempotent, so you can run it as many times as you like, and it shouldn't change the state any more than it already is. And it will be applied anytime the checksum of that repeatable migration script is changed. It will run after the versioned or undo migrations have done for any batch. So on the versioned, it's up to you to decide what type of versioning scheme you want to do. you typically want to have use the same. So you either have auto increment value or date based. It's really up to you, but you need to be able to. It needs to follow a given numerical order. And the undo migrations will undo at one specific migration, and only do that. And it's something, if you can really avoid it, try to do so. I will cover Flyway Hub as a tool for how to test these migrations afterwards. So let's go to Visual Studio and to Flyway. And all the code that I display here is public on GitHub, and I will send the link afterwards. We have a set of SQL files that are checked in, and we also have a Flyway config file that points us to the correct database. And when we go to the terminal, we can try to see what's the current state and apply that change. It takes a bit of time. And after this is done, we will also try to add a new file, apply that, and then push this into GitHub to see how it looks like. And we can see we have 3 migrations that are pending. So let's try to add them. And running the info again, we will see that we will have applied that all the migrations have been applied. It should be state success. Right. So let's try to add a new file. Going into Visual Studio, let's take a look at the new file. So being a developer, we are of course extremely good at naming. So I chose table 5 in this case. And let's try to run the migrations again, and let's try to push this to GitHub to see what happens. Right, so we have added the new, it's been applied locally. So let's see if we can push this to GitHub. So we're pushing it now to a new branch. And let's create a pull request. Yeah, let's just add that. And in Visual Studio here, let's take a look at the pipelines, YAML files, the GitHub Actions. So here we have this is the migration that has been created by Flyway Hub, which we will take a look at. This has been auto-generated. I think the only thing I changed was on what path we hit the builds on. And here on the it's a wildcard that will also include any given folder or file folder or subfolder, if I remember correctly. So this was auto-generated when I connected Flyway Hub, and let's take a look at Flyway Hub in the browser. So we have things that were we had one that was failing. So let's take a look at the detail here. Okay. It looks like Flyway Hub has updated to a later version, so I needed to use a new one. That was a bit unfortunate. I didn't test this one today because not to ruin my presentation. But let's take a look at how it looks like in Flyway Hub. So this is what it looked like before I added when I did the 3 previous runs. And here it's checked out, and you have a full. It's tried to apply all of the. It's tried to apply all of the. It's tried to apply all of the changes, the migrations, and to see that it would actually work. Let's try to. I'm going to close this tab now, and I need to find, since I can't see tabs here, let's try to see what was done on the on the other action. So if we go into Visual Studio, let's take a look at the second GitHub Actions pipeline that was set up. So this is the standard published to Azure that's generated through Visual Studio with some additions that I've made. So let's focus on those additions. The additions is here that I've created a new step that is to deploy a migration, and here I simply use the built-in GitHub support of Docker, and there is a pre-built Docker image that only needs to have the SQL files and the config or the URL of the database that we need to connect it to. And here I pointed it to, I mounted the SQL folder that's been checked out, and then ran the migrate command. So going back to the browser, let's take a look at the output of this task. And here we can see that we have actually applied the new version that we created. So we now have the add table 5 that we just checked in. Right, so going back to the PowerPoint, I'm going to skip over to the next demo, EntityFramework Core code first with migrations. And similar structure. We have a web project that we need to deploy. So created a new project and added the pipeline or the push to Azure, and then did some modifications. So let's take a look at this. So something that's new and very exciting for me in EntityFramework is the support for bundled migrations. So here we can create a self-contained executable with the migrations ready to run, so that you can run this as a part of your continuous delivery pipeline. Because it is not recommended to do this, as said earlier, to do this as a part of the application itself. Another reason that I did not mention earlier could also be in terms of permissions. You may not want your web application to have the destructive power to run changes into the database schema itself. And this you can avoid much more easily now with the bundle migration. So we first create the bundle migration, and then we upload the artifact. And I chose to upload both the bundle executable as well as the migration into artifacts, so that we have this for future reference. And before we push to Azure, we first download the EntityFramework migrations artifact, make it executable, and then we execute this command. We execute this executable with our connection string, which is of course stored in the GitHub Actions secrets. And with this, we can deploy a change out to production as well. So let's try to do that. I'm going to be just as creative here, and let's do a table 2. And we need to set this up into the EntityFramework context. 1 second. And I'm going to be just as creative and just to rename here for effectiveness purposes. So let's try to apply this now in let's try to apply this, but first we need to do one more step, and that is we need to run. So I'm just going to close here. We need to be able to add a new migration here. In case I already reused that name, I'm going to add it to have another postfix, and this will create another source file for us with the migration steps needed, which we also will check in. Let's see what I forgot this time. doing a full build. Let's try that again. All right, so moving into Visual Studio again, we will see that we have now a new CS file added as well. So let's do new branch, and let's include all our changes. So let's commit and push. So let's take a look at what's happening in the browser and on the actions. And the reason why also the Flyway actions are running is that I also included the changes in this build as well, or in this pull request. So let's take a look at the various actions here and on the entity framework test. Right, sorry, that was the known failure. And we are running the deployment now. And we can see that we are in fact pulling down the artifacts and are executing the migrations. So we now have the new table pushed out to Azure, to our SQL Azure database. Yes, so moving on to our final option on SQL Project that creates DacPac files. So going into Visual Studio, let's take a look at DacPac database projects. Many of you may have been using database projects before, either to create assemblies for .NET assemblies that run inside SQL servers, or to use this for syncing and deploying databases. But typically you need a manual step to create the DacPac output. But what is new is that there is a new SDK type. So this is a new I created a new CS project file, and then I just changed the SDK to be MS Build SDK SQL Project of a given version. And here we can set what type of target framework, what server version that we're targeting, and if we want to, and we also at the moment need to say that this needs to be built on .NET 5. This is probably something that will be addressed soon, if not already. And then we include the SQL files from the previous from the other project. And if we go into our terminal, we can now run .NET Build on that folder and get a DBpack or get a DacPac out of our project that can be readily used. So moving back to Visual Studio, let's take a look at the GitHub Actions pipeline, the YAML file. So we need to do a bit more work here than on the other pipelines because first we need to set up .NET Core 5 as well, and then we can do the build of DacPac that I just ran in the browser, that just ran in the terminal as well, and then we can then we upload it, we publish it, and then moving on to the deployment, where we will run. There is a pre-built action that Azure has that Azure is supporting, Azure/SQL action, and here you only need to specify the connection, the database name, the server name, and the server name and connection string, and the actual package that you want to use, which will then be applied. And as we can see here, this will be applied before actually updating the web application, so that we can be sure that we are up to the correct version. So if we go into our database project, just copy the table A, and let's use table C here, since that's the naming that we're going with on this project. And you can see the IntelliSense actually warns us that there is an existing table. So the DacPac is a zip file that contains some metadata, that contains some XML-based metadata that has understanding of the domain that you're has understanding of the schema that you're trying to push. So let's try to push this out, or we can try to do a build locally first, just to see. So let's try again. We can see if then we can see that our file was included. So our new table C was added to the model. Going into Visual Studio, let's create a new branch. And let's DacPac. Yeah, I'm including the changes from the previous project, so the previous changes. So that of course wasn't needed, but I'm a bit short on time now. And let's include table C. So let's commit, push, and let's create a pull request. So let's go into the actions and try to find the one relevant for us now. So we're building up, setting up the .NET Core after a while, and we should be able to build the DacPac, publish it, and then let's move on to the deployment. Right, that was a success. Let's see if we are able to do the deployment as well. We're running it now. Of course, if you have security concerns, you could also open the open the firewall to just a specific address at deployment time and then close it afterwards. Or you could run this deployment step locally or a part of your environment, either as to have a GitHub Actions runner in your environment, or to deploy it, or to have this executable run on other means, either as a container or function app, or depending on the problem that you're trying to solve and the security considerations. You could also manually apply the SQL scripts that we get as an output, and this could really be an option. For example, when you're pushing to production after verifying it automatically on previous environments. So you can see here we created the table C and update completed. And now it's just publishing it to the web app, so it's not much more to see there. Going back to PowerPoint, let's go to the questions before we wrap up with our last couple of slides. Flyway? Well, I would say, of course, in our line of business, the natural answer almost to any question is that it depends. If you have a very simple application that only have one node, uh, then of course, and you already have built-in support for entity framework, you're using code first, I probably would recommend sticking with that. But I would really recommend in that case to try to check out this approach to to push the database changes into the deployment pipeline. As we can see, it's only a matter of a few lines of code, so it's certainly worth it. On larger applications, you probably want to use either DacPac or Flyway. It depends more on the type of data that you want to manage and your competency. Um, that Flyway, for example, supports a lot more databases than what the SQL project does. So that could be deciding factors. Was that an answer to your question? Any other? Can I then ask the crowd here? Are there anyone who's actually doing automated deployment and are using source control of databases in some manner? And what type of approach do you use? I certainly hope that quiet doesn't mean nobody's doing it. Okay, so let's move on. I have some links. I will share them in the chat right afterwards as well. And we also have some info on how to get started with SQL Azure that you could check out. We will post a link on this as well. So huge thank to both Microsoft and RedGate as our sponsors. And then I just have to say thank you. Yeah, no problem. Bye. Yeah, bye.